Two investors can earn the same exact income in a year, but pay a significantly different amount in taxes. Same exact paycheck, same exact profit, but one of them writes a big check to the IRS while the other one writes a small check or might even get a refund. One of the biggest reasons for this gap is usually depending on whether or not they own real estate in their portfolio. And the difference can be a 6 or 7 figure amount in 1 year. I mean, those yearly savings can compound tremendously if you go ahead and reinvest that. I'm Brian Spear, a commercial real estate investor, and in this video, I'm going to explain 3 different key reasons why investing in real estate can lower your tax bill and keep more money in your pocket. Quick note before we dive into this, I'm not your CPA and none of this is financial or tax advice, okay? Real estate is a highly tax advantaged asset, but the details of your specific situation depend entirely on your personal facts. So please do talk to a qualified professional before investing in anything, okay? So let's dive in. Strategy number 1, deduct expenses and depreciation today. The first way real estate saves you money is the most immediate. It can lower the taxes you owe this year. And here's a few ways that real estate investors do it, okay? When you own real estate as an investment, the ordinary costs of running it are deductible against the income that it produces. Okay? So property taxes, insurance, repairs, management fees, and the interest on your loan, all that stuff is deductible. So if a property brings in rent, revenue, and you spend money operating it, and paying interest, you're only taxed on what's left over. That part is fairly intuitive, okay? It works like any other business. Now, there's an important fork in the road here between investing actively and investing passively, and it changes how far these deductions can reach. To put it simply, if you're actively involved in real estate, these write-offs can potentially offset other kinds of active income. And if you're a passive investor, they generally offset the income from that investment itself or other passive investments. And that's a really important distinction that we have a video explaining the difference between how the IRS treats active and passive income. So if you need clarification, I'd recommend watching it. We'll put a link around here somewhere. But either way, the point stands. You're sheltering income that you would otherwise be paying tax on. Let's talk about depreciation. The tax code assumes that a building slowly wears out over time. And for that reason, the government allows you to deduct that wear and tear as an expense. Even though in the real world, a well-run piece of real estate, the vast majority of it, often increases in value over long periods of time. And that deduction that you receive is called depreciation. Because depreciation is a deduction rather than an expense that you're paying in that calendar year, it can create what is known as a paper loss. So the property can actually generate positive cash flow, meaning it can put real money and cash going into your account, into your pocket, while you're reporting a loss on your tax return because the depreciation deduction is greater than the property's taxable income. It's a phantom loss, as it were. You can collect cash and report a loss from the same exact investment in the same exact year. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds here, and I will likely have some additional videos getting pretty granular on this later on. But in brief, there are 2 different tools that can help real estate investors front load depreciation and potentially receive tax benefits much sooner. The first one is accelerated depreciation through a cost segregation study. So some parts of a property, they wear out much faster than the building itself, right? As you can imagine, the building can have flooring, light fixtures, appliances, and maybe land improvements like parking spaces, paving, landscaping, all that stuff. It actually wears out faster than just the building itself. So instead of depreciating these items over the building's full 27 and a half years or 39-year schedule, the qualifying components, they might be able to get depreciated over a shorter period, like 5 years or 7 years or 15 years. And you can use a cost segregation study to identify those items and separate those components, which allows you to move more of the depreciation into the earlier years of ownership. And this is known as accelerated depreciation. And the second tool is bonus depreciation. And this is really where depreciation can become a superpower. Unlike the standard depreciation schedules, the bonus depreciation percentage is determined by the current federal tax law. So the guys up in Washington, this changes periodically, and it just changed with the passing of the Big Beautiful Bill in 2025. So under current federal tax law, eligible property that was acquired and placed into service after January 19th of 2025 may qualify for that 100% bonus depreciation. And that means you might be able to deduct the full value of anything that would qualify as a shorter life component in the year in which they're placed in service, rather than spreading out those deductions over 5 years or 7 years or 15 years. So it's wonderful to use a cost segregation study to basically depreciate something as opposed to over 27.5 years. You could bring it into 5 years or 7 years or 15 years, but it's even better if you could ultimately jam all of that depreciation into the very first year. To be clear, bonus depreciation doesn't generally allow you to deduct the property's full purchase price. Land is something that doesn't depreciate in value, so you can't actually write that off. And the building itself generally remains on its normal depreciation schedule, but the bonus depreciation, it applies only to those qualifying components. That said, the result can be a significant and massive paper loss in the very first year, even while the property continues to produce positive cash flow. Next is strategy number 2, defer taxes when you sell. Normally, when you sell something that's gone up in value, it triggers a tax bill. But real estate gives you several different ways to legally postpone that bill, sometimes indefinitely. When you sell an investment property at a profit, you typically owe capital gains tax, plus tax on the depreciation that you had claimed along the way. A 1031 exchange, named after that section of the tax code, it lets you defer all of that as long as you roll the proceeds into another, quote, like-kind property. Generally, you have 45 days from the time that you sell the first property to identify your replacement property, and you have a cumulative 180 days from the time that you sell a property to close on that replacement property. You also have to use what's called a qualified intermediary, a QI, as a custodian, meaning you can't take the cash into your own hands in between. If you miss the timeline, if you go ahead and take the cash yourself, all that deferral is gone. But when it works, it is very, very powerful. You can keep on trading up. This is the old monopoly move of trading 4 greenhouses up into a hotel, moving one smaller property into a larger one again and again and again. Investors call this the swap until you drop, because if you hold your properties until you pass away and pass them on to your heirs, that deferred tax can actually be wiped out through what's called a step-up in basis. Now, if you got a capital gain, whether it's from real estate or stocks or selling a business, pretty much anything, you can defer that tax by reinvesting that gain into a qualified opportunity fund, which invests in designated opportunity zones, usually lower income areas or underdeveloped neighborhoods that the government wants to attract investment into. So the government offers significant tax breaks to incentivize you for putting your money there. The headline benefit on these are very, very long term. If you hold that opportunity zone investment long enough, the appreciation on that new investment can come out completely tax-free. So I'm going to keep this one super high level because the specific rules and timelines for opportunity zone funds, they were changed by the big, beautiful tax legislation, and they haven't even rolled out the new maps of where these locations are going to be. The details on this genuinely matter. So if this is something that you're interested in considering, please do reach out to your CPA. He'll walk you through the most current version of the laws regarding opportunity zones. The third way is all about the tax rate. Favorable tax treatment on the income and the gains that you do realize. You can take money out of a property that you own without paying any tax on it. How does somebody pull this off? Well, it's not by selling it. What you do instead is refinance it. Once a property has appreciated in value, or you've paid down sufficient amounts of debt on that property, you've paid down the loan materially, you can then refinance that property and pull out the equity as loan proceeds. The reason this works is because borrowed money isn't income, so it is not taxed. You do not pay tax on debt. Just as importantly, if you never actually sell the property, you never trigger the capital gains tax or the depreciation recapture tax that you would if you ended up selling. So you walk away with tax-free cash to go buy your next deal while the original property stays in your portfolio, keeps producing income and keeps appreciating in value. Even when you do end up paying taxes on real estate, the code often taxes it far more gently than the money that you earn from a traditional W-2 job. When you sell an asset that you've held for longer than a year, depending on your income, long-term capital gains rates can be taxed at 0 or 15 or 20%, while ordinary income rates climb much, much higher than that, hovering right around 40% at the max rate right now. So something as simple as holding a property for more than a year before selling can change what you actually end up keeping after that sale. Now, remember that fork in the road between active and passive investing from earlier? The next option is really where it pays off the most. If you or your spouse qualify as a, quote, real estate professional in the eyes of the IRS and materially participate in your real estate investments, the losses from that real estate can be non-passive. So in simple terms, plain English here, the depreciation paper losses that we talked about earlier can potentially offset your active income, including a very high salary from a W-2 job. So for the right household, that is just an enormous lever. However, it's not automatic. There's specific hour requirements and participation tests that you have to meet, and you got to document that all along the way to become a real estate professional. So if you want to find out if a real estate professional status could apply to you, go ahead and ask your CPA. It's a massive, massive lever for the family. And finally, you can invest in real estate using retirement accounts that most people only ever point towards traditional stocks and bonds. With a self-directed IRA or a solo 401k, you can hold real estate or invest in a real estate fund right inside your retirement account. That means that the income and the gains grow tax deferred, or in the case of a Roth, they grow completely tax free. And if you want to learn more about obtaining real estate professional status, check the description for our free guide, okay? But as always, please do talk to your CPA about how any of this applies to you specifically. And if this was helpful, please do subscribe. Feel free to do it and share this video with a friend. We put out breakdown videos like this regularly, guys. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.